So this video is actually going to be two videos in one. And this is kind of the official start of the Revolutionary War because you actually have fighting between the colonists and the British troops. So for this first video, we're going to be talking about why the British were moving from Boston to Lexington and Concord, which are two neighboring towns in Massachusetts. We're going to talk about the importance of the Old North Church, Paul Revere's ride, and then the official battle of Lexington and Concord. Just a really quick picture here. These are two monuments that are in Lexington and Concord. This is known as the first battle of the Revolutionary War. It's an important battle of the Revolutionary War. So this is just kind of what they have there to commemorate this event. So the British troops are in Boston and they're controlling everything there. This is right after the Intolerable Acts. So tensions are extremely high. The British general hears that Minutemen are storing a large supply of arms, of weapons, guns. So they decided they're going to march to Concord and seize this because the colonists have no reason whatsoever to have any weapons on them. And while they were going up there to Concord, they were going to stop to arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock, which were two important leaders of the Sons of Liberty. Now, the colonists were no dummies. They knew that the British troops would want to arrest the leaders of the Sons of Liberty. So they set up a little signal to let each other know what was going on. And this is a picture of the Old North Church. And you can see the church steeple up there. So in that very top window, they would hang lanterns to depict the movement of British troops. So one if by land, two if by sea. If the Sons of Liberty only saw one lantern in the church steeple, that means that the British troops were moving on foot. If the Old North Church steeple had two lanterns, that means that the British troops were then moving by sea. And as the British troops are leaving Boston and they're heading up to Concord to get the arms and to arrest Adams and Hancock, this is when you have Paul Revere's famous ride, where he goes around the town screaming, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Now, the Sons of Liberty were a couple steps ahead of the British troops, and they knew that they were going there to arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock. So Paul Revere, on his little horse, saying the British are coming, and his buddy William Dawes actually head out to where Adams and Hancock were hiding to let them know that the British were coming to arrest them so that they could escape. As the British are marching to Concord, they stop in a town called Lexington, and they encounter Minutemen, or militia, basically just farmers that had guns. And they're standing there and they're facing each other with their weapons raised, and then all of a sudden, just like in the Boston Massacre, a shot is fired. That shot is known as the shot heard round the world, and it is the first shot, the first official shot of the Revolutionary War. And in this battle, 8 colonists were killed. So that's the Battle of Lexington. This is a very pretty painting depicting the British troops marching through Concord. You can see all those lines. Those are actually supposed to be British soldiers that are marching through. So because Paul Revere and William Dawes knew what the British troops were doing and they were able to warn Adams and Hancock, they were also able to warn the people of Concord that the troops were going there. So they take all of their weapons and they hide them in a big hole in the ground. So they basically dig up a big hole, they put all of the arms in there, and they cover it back up. And when the British troops get there, absolutely no weapons were found. But you did have the Minutemen, again, just regular civilians that had weapons, that were there waiting for them. And you have now the Battle of Concord, in which 73 British soldiers were killed. The British troops were shocked that the colonists were basically attacking them, so they retreat. They leave Concord and they head back to Boston. And the entire way that they're heading back to Boston and they're walking, back in their little lines, you have colonists that are popping up from the side of the roads, from behind trees and behind bushes, that are just firing on them. So they actually end up taking a heavy loss of life on the march back to Boston. So that's the end of video 1. You guys are about to start video 2 in a couple of seconds, but make sure you're able to answer these 4 questions before moving on. Why were the British originally going to Lexington and then to Concord? What is the importance of the Old North Church? who's Paul Revere and William Dawes, and then what are their roles, and then finally, what are the results of the battles of Lexington and Concord. So the second video, we're going to be talking about the Green Mountain Boys, Fort Ticonderoga, the Boston evacuation of Boston. That should be the British evacuation of Boston. That's a typo, so make sure that you notice that. British evacuation of Boston. And then finally, the Second Continental Congress. This lovely flag is the flag of the Green Mountain Boys, hence the green color that you see there. And you see that you have the stars there. Now, if you count the stars, there are 13 stars, one for each colony, so it's very similar, an early form of our American flag. Now, the British troops were stationed in a fort known as Fort Ticonderoga, and you had a man by the name of Ethan Allen that was living in the Vermont area. Remember, Vermont is not a colony, but he was living up in that area, and he forms a group called the Green Mountain Boys, and they stage a surprise attack on the fort, surprising the British troops that are there. An important person that was with Ethan Allen that day is General Benedict Arnold. Now, for those of you that don't know this name, Benedict Arnold, he was the traitor during the Revolutionary War. So initially, he's on the colonist side, and he's for the revolution, and he's for independence. He then switches over halfway through, and he joins the British and fights against the colonists. So we'll talk a little bit about him later on. The British end up surrendering the fort, and with this fort, you have lots of arms. So this is awesome for the colonists because they were running low on supplies. So the fact that they now have weapons and gunpowder, they're able to keep fighting the British. Since the colonists now have these weapons and these arms available to them that they were captured at the fort from the British, this helps with the British evacuating the city of Boston in March of 1776. So the capturing of Fort Ticonderoga was extremely important to helping the colonists establish themselves and helping move out the British from Boston. After the battles of Boston and Lexington, after the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, you have the meeting of the Second Continental Congress. In this meeting, the delegates from each colony send King George III what's known as the Olive Branch Petition. And I know that petition's cut off. But basically what they say is, you need to repeal the Intolerable Acts, and we will remain your colonies. We will remain loyal to you. But we're just asking that you take away the Intolerable Acts. And this old-looking piece of paper is the signatures of the delegates at the Second Continental Congress that signed the Olive Branch Petition. King George III picks up this petition, the Olive Branch Petition, and he basically laughs at it. He refuses to repeal the Intolerable Acts, and the delegates now at the Second Continental Congress have to do something else because King George III isn't listening to them. And this is when they officially set up their own army to fight the British Army, and they become known as the Continental Army. So the Continental Army are the colonists, and they name George Washington as commander. Remember, George Washington gained his experience as a commander and as a leader during the French and Indian War. So this is going to be important to remember when we talk about the battles and the different people that pop up. So you're finally done with the video. You should be able to answer these 5 questions, though. Who are the Green Mountain Boys? You know, who led them and what's their connection to the Fort Ticonderoga? What's the importance of the fort? Why did the British evacuate Boston? Think about the fort. What is the Olive Branch Petition? And then finally, what took place during the Second Continental Congress? Before something was sent to King George III and then after something was sent to King George III. So make sure you guys have good notes, answer your blog, and I will see you guys tomorrow in class.